Welcome. I would like to welcome you to episode 397 of the Unpopular Podcast. This is the man, the myth, the legend, Jalen Hunter. And here at the Unpopular Podcast, I'm not really asked you to agree with me. I'm asking you to hear me out. Going into this divisional round, every game had intrigue. Every game had a different storyline attached to it. And before we even go that far, the question is, what do you look for in a football game? What do you look for, or what entertains you about a football game? And we're going to talk about subjective questions all throughout this episode, but that is a subjective question. Because you can ask 10 people what they look forward to or what's the most exciting, what's the most important part of a football game, and you'll get 10 different answers. So I'll answer for myself. Going into a football game, I think storylines are important. I talked about this maybe last episode or a couple episodes of game. Storylines are extremely important in sports, whether that's basketball, football, any sport that you're discussing. A storyline is important. And it's important because it allows the viewer, it allows somebody that's not technically a part of said sport or said event to feel like they're part of it, to feel like they are invested in something through storylines, whether that's how is this player going to play? How is that team going to play? What happens if X player wins? What happens if X player loses? Storylines fuel sports. And I don't think there was a game this weekend or last weekend that had as many storylines as the Kansas City Chiefs and Buffalo Bills game. Now, you can look at this question, you can look at this game, you can look at what I just said, the statement I just made about the storylines. You can look at that in so many different angles, which is why I think that this game was so intriguing. You see, both teams had storylines connected with each other, but both teams also had storylines outside of the initial game. Which is why I think that this was one of the most anticipated matchups of not just the weekend, but of the season if we were to have gotten here. You know that feeling. I don't know that feeling because I don't have a big brother or a big sister. But you know that feeling when a big brother, big sister, maybe a cousin or somebody older than you continues to get the best of you at something. I kind of equate this to when a father or mother, whoever is good at a sport, plays basketball with their child. And they continue to get the best of them. And if that child continues to work on it and that child continues to grow and get older, there will be a time when that child is eventually better than their dad. I have a quick story. I play basketball. I played basketball my entire life. Probably since I was 5. That's when I played organized basketball. And up until now, which I still play, I'm not professional or anything, but I still play on any given weekend. And for the longest, I could not beat my dad in basketball. Now, my dad doesn't play basketball, but my dad is physically bigger than me. He is taller than me. He's 4, 6'5". He's strong. He played semi-pro football, but I could never get the best of my dad. And it was a running joke throughout, me and him and my dad's side of the family. It's like, how do you call yourself a basketball player, but you can't beat a football player? It was annoying. And that would fuel me at times. That would fuel me to I'm not going to continue to beat or to lose to my dad. Now, eventually, I got older, I got taller, I got bigger. My dad got older, and I eventually beat him. But until I quote unquote reach that mountaintop of beating my dad, there was always a level of animosity in that area towards me and my dad. There was anytime basketball came up talking about me and him playing, he would always get on his high horse. I always beat Jay. I always beat Jay. Like, oh, okay. But I couldn't say nothing because that was true. Let's get back to this Kansas City Chiefs Buffalo Bills game. One of the storylines going into it was the proverbial little brother kid or little brother baby brother relationship that this Kansas City Chiefs and Buffalo Bills were forming. We talked about records with the matchups of these two teams and how the Buffalo Bills in recent years have gotten the best of the Kansas City Chiefs in the regular season. But in the postseason, the Kansas City Chiefs continued to win. The Patrick Mahomes, the Andy Reid Chiefs continued to beat the Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, Sean McDermott, Buffalo Bills. And the question was, will the Bills ever get over that hump? Will the Bills ever slay their proverbial big brother, in this case, in the Kansas City Chiefs in the playoffs? You see, that's just one storyline. We can talk about the fact that the Bills have been to 4 Super Bowls and lost all of them. We can talk about the fact of Josh Allen has had statistically one of his best years that he's had in his career this year, even with the rough start that the Bills had. You can talk about if there was any window, I will apologize. I'm not even going to apologize because I'm not sorry for my take. I was wrong. I came in here and said that the Buffalo Bills Super Bowl window, championship window is closed. And I was even going as far as saying that this Buffalo Bills team is masquerading as a Super Bowl caliber team. Well, I wholeheartedly believe that I was wrong in that area. Am I sorry? No, but I was wrong. What I've seen from Josh Allen, what I've seen from this Buffalo Bills team, they are a Super Bowl caliber team. But they have to get over this proverbial hump. Because if not, Kansas City Chiefs ain't going nowhere. And here, there was a fun stat, and this is no shot to Lamar Jackson, but this kind of puts in context how good not only Josh Allen is, but how the Buffalo Bills have used Josh Allen. Josh Allen, over the last 4 years, I believe, has 74 more touchdowns than Lamar Jackson. Now, this is the same Lamar Jackson that's going to win a second MVP. And this is the same Lamar Jackson that is a game away from the Super Bowl, something that the Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen, well, let me not say the Buffalo Bills, that Josh Allen has not been. But I haven't even talked about this game yet, so let's talk about this game. The Kansas City Chiefs beat the Buffalo Bills 27-24. And watching this game, I understand, because at the end of the game, they were showing Bills fans crying. At the end of the game, you were seeing on, ESPN, on FS1, on different news or sports news outlets, how this is such a quote-unquote depressing loss for the Bills. I came in here last episode and talked about balance and talked about how the Buffalo Bills have struggled with balance all throughout Josh Allen's tenure outside of this season. I talked about how going into almost every game was a challenge for the Buffalo Bills because there was always a level of Josh Allen save us, or we only trust Josh Allen. They never really invested in the running game. They never really invested in other parts of the game outside of Josh Allen. Now, again, Josh Allen is one of the most physically talented quarterbacks we've ever seen. I will say that. He is one of the most gifted quarterbacks we've ever seen. When we talk about a build for a quarterback, when we talk about size, when we talk about arm strength, when we talk about speed, where we talk about elusivity, when we talk about pocket presence, Josh Allen is one of the most skilled, talented quarterbacks the NFL has ever seen. But this game shows you that talent, having that build, having that title, doesn't essentially mean you're going to win. Now, getting back to storylines. The storylines going into this game for the Kansas City Chiefs were this was one of the weakest teams we have seen Patrick Mahomes lead. Now, a lot of it was because of the lack of confidence that was built with the wide receiver core because of the drops. The Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver core led the league in drops, which also essentially led to the Kansas City Chiefs offense not being as prolific as it's been throughout Patrick Mahomes' tenure. So when we talk about storylines, the storyline was if the Bills were going to win a game, if the Bills were ever going to slay the proverbial big brother, the proverbial giant in their way, which is the Kansas City Chiefs, this would have been the year. Which goes back to my point of why I understand why people were crying at the end of this game, Buffalo Bills fans. I understand why Buffalo Bills fans were so upset and so enamored at the fact that, or questioning, are we ever going to win? Because, like I alluded, everything was in the Buffalo Bills' favor this year. While, yes, Buffalo did struggle in the regular season, they were coming in as arguably the hottest team in football. They just beat the Steelers. I think they were on a six game win streak, I believe, maybe 7 game. This was the first time in the Kansas City Chiefs Buffalo Bills rivalry with Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes that the game was in Buffalo. In fact, on top of that, this was Patrick Mahomes' first away playoff game. So the stage was set for Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills to essentially win this game. But when you watch this game, I'm not big on putting blame on one person. I've always said, if a game has to come down to a ref call, if a game has to come down to a field goal miss or a field goal make, that means something went wrong. Either something went extremely right and you guys just fought to the death, or you guys fought and it was a very competitive game, or something went wrong that you needed the refs to help you in your favor, or you needed the refs to make that call, or you needed that field goal. Watching this game, and I think what was so disheartening about this game when we talk about the Buffalo Bills, Josh Allen had an incredible game. Josh Allen played exactly how he needed to play until the fourth quarter. Josh Allen, I'm not going to say was out-dueling Lamar or Patrick Mahomes, but he was going toe-for-toe with Patrick Mahomes. A depleted defense due to injury for the Buffalo Bills was holding its, well, no, it wasn't. Started to get stops. the second, like the late third quarter, early fourth, they were starting to get stops. Josh Allen was slicing and dicing. He was playing great. And you can have an argument that he was the better quarterback in the game until they needed him to be the definitive better quarterback. You see, I'm not putting this loss on Patrick or on Josh Allen, but what I am doing is I'm laying blame at his feet, or I'm laying the blame that he deserves at his feet. Josh Allen has had an innate. Let me. How am I going to say this? Josh Allen has had a habit of going for the kill shot. Sometimes, at times when you don't need the kill shot, he goes for the kill shot. Sometimes when you just need the easy 4 or 5 yard completion, he'll go for the 30-yarder. Sometimes when you need the easy flats throw, or sometimes when you need the easy 7-yard throw to get a first down, that's open, he'll go for the 60-yard bomb. That's a gift and a curse for Josh Allen, because the curse and the gift is he's talented enough to make those. Again, goes back to my point. Josh Allen is one of the most talented quarterbacks the NFL has ever seen. I know that's crazy to hear, but think about it. How many quarterbacks do you know has the arm strength, has the arm talent, has the accuracy like Josh Allen? I'll say it. Tom Brady isn't as God-gifted, talented as Patrick Mahomes. I mean, not Patrick Mahomes, I'm sorry. As Josh Allen. But he is better than Josh Allen because of moments like this. Josh Allen is a much more talented quarterback than Tom Brady. But he is never going to be Tom Brady because of moments like this. So, we can talk about the 60-yard bomb that Stephon Diggs essentially dropped. Or we can talk about the pass that went to, I forgot, in fact, I can see his name, that went to Shakur, that would have been a touchdown if, Josh Allen the pocket didn't shrink, and if Josh Allen wasn't hit while he threw the ball. That would have been a touchdown. That essentially would have put them up. But in typical Josh Allen fashion, at least in this series, those plays were unable to be made. And I'm not getting on Josh Allen for dropping the ball. Obviously, he didn't throw it to himself. But I am getting on Josh Allen to why throw a 60-yard bomb, especially when you're scared to give Patrick Mahomes the ball because the defense was struggling at this point, and you don't want them to get much time. Why go for a 60-yard bomb when you can get the 7-yard completion to a Dalton Kincaid, and it's a first down, which also gives you yet another first down, and it gives you time off the clock. And then we talk. Let's go to the kick. Tyler Bass misses a potential game-tying kick with like a minute 45 left, minute 50. And as one of the reasons, I think you essentially have to do your job. I understand the conditions are hard. I understand that it was windy as hell. But the reason why we're getting on Josh Allen as much is because we need him to play, or people need him to play at a high level to get to where you're getting to. You need to essentially do your job. And Tyler Bass, at that moment, failed at his job. But you know what? You know what was the feeling that I had watching that moment and watching him miss the kick, which was unfortunately wide right. And wide right scars the Buffalo Bills franchise for decades now. I was watching that kick and I thought to myself, even if he would have made that kick, it would essentially been 27-27 at the time. I still think the Kansas City Chiefs would have won. I still think that Patrick Mahomes would have marched down the field in a minute and 50, a minute and 45 seconds and either scored or got them in the end zone, or scored or got them in field goal range. One of my favorite things to talk about on this podcast, and I will admit that I talk about it a lot, is the margin of error. And I understand that this is a team in the Kansas City Chiefs that the Buffalo Bills have struggled with mightily in recent memory in the postseason. But one of the reasons for that is the margin of error. You see, and I said this to Brittany, because we were watching the game together, and I said, yo, the margin of error is so small for the Bills, for the Kansas City Chiefs, that little things, even they could be first down sacks, they could be third down drops, they could be McCole Harmon fumbling in the end zone, it could be Josh Allen fumbling on potentially the last drive, which was thankfully picked up by his team. But I told her, yo, the margin of error is so small that something as small as a sack could drastically turn this game, and can drastically end this game, and can drastically dictate the outcome of this game. And you look back, I'm not saying that the drop, the 60-yard bomb to Stephon Diggs, I'm not saying the drop was the worst part. The worst part was, why do it? Why? I admit that, and the last thing I'll say about this before I move on, all the factors were there. This was one of the weaker Kansas City Chiefs team. Josh Allen was playing at an MVP level majority of the season. And going into this game, he was playing at an MVP level in the playoffs. While, yes, a lot of your defense was injured, the Chiefs defense suffered injuries in this game. And this was the year. This was the year. If there was going to be any year, this was the year. And quiet as it's kept, I'm going to wait to give my prediction for the conference championships on Saturday. But if we talk about play style, I would have given the Bills a much better shot at beating the Ravens than the Chiefs. Now I'll talk about it and break it down on Saturday's episode, but this was the year. If you were going to get over that proverbial hump, this was the year, and you ultimately failed. I think that, and I was wrong. I can admit that I was wrong. I think that seeing how Josh Allen plays, looking just at the statistics and looking at how good Josh Allen, when he is great, when Josh Allen is incredible, when Josh Allen is playing at his peak ability, there isn't many quarterbacks in league history better than Josh Allen. But as we've seen, that doesn't matter if you can't slay your proverbial giant, which in this case, in the postseason, in recent memory for Josh Allen has been Patrick Mahomes in this Kansas City Chiefs. The margin of error is small. It doesn't matter how weak or how strong the Kansas City Chiefs are in any given year. When you're going against somebody that has a winning record in the playoffs, when you're going against someone that only has 3 losses in the playoffs, in his playoff career, he has 3 losses. 2 of them is to Tom Brady. The margin of error is minimal. And the quote is pretty much, you have to come correct or you will lose. And as we saw against the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills, the margin of error was too small for the Buffalo Bills, and they ultimately lost to the Kansas City Chiefs 27-24. And until they clean up that margin of error, or until they slay their proverbial giant, while the Kansas, you know what it is? Very last thing I'll say. I think the Buffalo Bills championship window rests on 2 shoulders. One on Josh Allen and how long he can be great, and how long Kansas City Chiefs can be great. Because as we've seen, at this point, the Buffalo Bills have not shown the ability to beat them in the postseason. So shouts out to the Kansas City Chiefs for beating Buffalo 27-24. The narrative going into the Houston Texans Baltimore Ravens game was simple. Lamar Jackson needed to win that game. I said it. People on national television said it. Hell, people out of Baltimore. I think Lamar Jackson even said it. We're going to talk about Kevin Durant in a second. Or we're going to talk about Kevin Durant later in the show. But the question is, what makes somebody great? And the question is, what makes somebody a quote-unquote all-timer? And in football, the quarterback is always going to get the most blame and the most praise. And when we talk about greatness at the quarterback position, because the margin of error is so small, not margin of error, because the margin of differences is so small, meaning because of the play style and because of because of abilities that Lamar Jackson may be better than in some people, I don't think there's a wide gap. I think there's a gap, but I don't think there's a wide gap between Patrick Mahomes' talent level and Lamar Jackson's talent level. I think that there's things that Patrick Mahomes does much better than Lamar Jackson, but I also think that there's things that Lamar Jackson does much better than Patrick Mahomes. I don't think that there's much of a talent gap between a Lamar Jackson and a Joe Burrow, between a Lamar Jackson or a Josh Allen, between the great quarterbacks. But because I don't think there's much of a distance between talents, that's when you have to start putting in accolades. That's when accolades matter the most. That's one of the reasons why I'm so critical on someone like a Justin Herbert or someone like a Trevor Lawrence, because they have the talent to be in that Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson discussion. But once you start putting him in there, the accolades don't match up at all. So going into this Baltimore Ravens, Houston Texans game, Lamar Jackson he had the talent, but he just didn't have the postseason accolades. He had the regular season MVP. likely going to have his second MVP. He has the rushing records. He has the Baltimore Ravens records. But it was that postseason that was a major scar in the Lamar Jackson is one of, if not the best quarterback in the league argument. Because what they would say is, well, if Lamar Jackson is that, why is he only 1-3 in the playoffs? At that point, it's like, yeah. Now, I was on the table saying that those teams are different teams. True. Very true. And this Lamar Jackson is much better than that Lamar Jackson. Very true. But your record is your record. What is on you is on you. And he needed to get over that proverbial hump to quiet some naysayers. And I say some naysayers because people hate being wrong. It's very wrong. I mean, it's very hard for somebody to admit when they're wrong. In fact, there are people that will go to their dying grave knowing that they're wrong, but will never admit that they're wrong. That's life. There's people in your family. There's people in my family. There's people that we see on a day-to-day basis that will die on that wrong hill. And people that say Lamar Jackson can't throw the ball know they're wrong. People that say people that think or that said that Lamar Jackson can't play quarterback in the league, they know they're wrong. People that said that Lamar Jackson can't develop into a pocket passer, even they know they're wrong. People that said that Lamar Jackson is just a bona fide running back or a wide receiver and isn't smart enough to develop into an NFL type quarterback, they know they're wrong. But most of them will never admit it. So most of them will die on that hill of Lamar Jackson isn't that good. Lamar Jackson isn't this. Lamar Jackson isn't that. Even though they know they're wrong, they will not admit it. It's very rare for podcasters like myself to even come here. I said I was wrong. I've been wrong on several occasions. I came across an old blog that I used to do when I was in college. It was an assignment. We had to create a blog, and we had to have like 2 or 3, maybe even 4 entries weekly. And I remember saying with confidence too that what's his name? Boy. Oh man, Josh. There was somebody I totally. In fact, I'm going to look it up because I need to tell you guys what I said to let you know how wrong I was. Because I was extremely and that's it. I said in 2017 that Josh Jackson, remember Josh Jackson? He's still in the league, but remember Josh Jackson from Kansas and how there was a huge debate between Josh Jackson and Jason Tatum, who was going to be better in the NBA, who was more NBA ready, who was going to have a better NBA career, who should go above who. Well, I was on that Josh Jackson is going to have a better career and is more NBA ready than Jason Tatum. I said that. I said that. You see how wrong I was. And it's cool to admit that. But there are some people that will never admit that. So getting back to this game, Lamar Jackson not only needed to win this game for his own story, but he needed to win this game because of how the dominoes were lining up. Spoiler alert, newsflash, it's very hard to win a championship in any sport. It's very hard to win in any sport. These are professional teams, professional athletes that we're going against. And there are some times, and this is going back to the first point, this is why I got on Josh Allen so many times. And this is why I was standing on that the Bills are masquerading as Super Bowl champion or Super Bowl caliber teams, because it's very rare. It happens at times. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. But it's very rare. But there are occasions where everything lines up for you. Everything lines up for your team to essentially make a deep playoff run, to essentially win a Super Bowl. Everything lines up in very rare instances. For the Bills, this has happened maybe twice. When they had a shot to play Joe Burrow at home, it was snowing. That was their shot. They blew that one. They had Kansas City Chiefs, one of the weakest Kansas City Chiefs, at least offenses, Patrick Mahomes has had. And you're at home, first away game for Patrick Mahomes. You blew that one. If you look at this Baltimore Ravens team, everything is lining up for them. The stars are aligning for Baltimore. Lamar Jackson is having one of his best statistical seasons he's had in his career. He's about to win his second MVP. And this is by far the best team that he has ever had. This isn't the first time he's been number one in the AFC. Don't get me wrong. But this is by far the best team that he has ever had. Whether we talk about having the wide receiver core with Zay Flowers and Odell Beckham Jr., or having Isaiah Likely emerge as a top target, seeing as though Mark Andrews was out. The running game, they're down to the third and fourth string running backs, but Gus Edwards and Hall, they're good. And then you also have Dalvin Cook, who made some plays. And then on the defense side of the ball, this is the best defense they've ever had with Roquan Smith and Jadeveon Clowney and Marlon Humphreys and Kyle Hamilton. And I think his name is Metabitsi. And Patrick Queen. The Baltimore Ravens pretty much demolished through the first or regular season. Yes, they had 3 losses, maybe 4 losses. I'm not going to really count the last one against the Steelers because nobody played. So they had pretty much 3 losses, and all 3 of those losses, they were up in every single game with 2 minutes to go in the game. But they did a demolition job on the 49ers. They did a demolition job on the Dolphins. They did a demolition job on the Lions. This was the year. So, and the Baltimore Ravens looked all of a Super Bowl, looked like all of a Super Bowl caliber team. So this was the year that Lamar Jackson had to win. Had to. There's nothing, barring an injury, which, knock on wood, I don't hope for anyone. There was nothing that you could have said to me to justify Baltimore losing this game if they would have lost. And don't get me wrong, that's even coming off of how good the Houston Texans have been. Shouts out to the Houston Texans, man. The fact that they got here with a first-year coach, first-year quarterback, a first-year defensive star is incredible. And there was not a lot of people, but there were some people that said, no, CJ Stroud has been great, which he has, and he is likely or possible to win the Offensive Rookie of the Year. You can see a lane where they could have lost. That is the Baltimore Ravens, but Lamar Jackson needed this win. And the Baltimore Ravens beat the Houston Texans 34-10. It was shaky in the beginning, and like I said, it was going to be rust. I said if there was one thing that can beat the Baltimore Ravens, it was injuries and rust. And they looked rusty as hell the first half of this game. They went into halftime tied 10-10. And C.J. Stroud played as good as he could, but along with playing against this defense is tough on anyone. But they looked extremely rusty. They looked like a team that was off to some of these players 3 weeks. Because remember, a lot of the starters didn't play in the Steelers game. So a lot of these players haven't played an NFL game in 3 weeks. And it looked like it. But come second half, the Baltimore Ravens looked all of the team that they look like this entire year. Lamar Jackson threw for 152 yards and ran for 100 yards. And they essentially demolished the Houston Texans. And I'm not saying, I think that proverbial monkey is not off of Lamar Jackson's back, because I think a lot of people, I'm going to hold him to. I think Lamar Jackson's still great, whether you win or not. But I think a lot of people expected them to beat the Texans, seeing as though the Texans were the second youngest team in the playoffs next to the Green Bay Packers. I think the test and the defining moment of Lamar Jackson's career is going to come on Saturday, going against the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, again, shouts out, and I'm not overlooking, shouts out to the Houston Texans for getting this far. Because no one, and I mean no one, expected the Texans not only to be this good, but to even have a say in the divisional round. Again, this is the same Texans team that was fighting tooth and nail to get into the playoffs with the Jaguars. And if it wasn't for the Jaguars stumbling in the last game against the Titans, there was a good shot that the Texans might not even make it. Now, they essentially had to beat the Colts, but you know. But shouts out to the Ravens for beating the Houston Texans 34-10. The Baltimore Ravens look all of a Super Bowl caliber team. And I'll give my prediction on Saturday. You know what I think you know what new information does? New data. You know what it does? I think that new information, new data, new stats, you can say, allows for the ability to change opinions. And allows for the ability to either enhance, improve, or completely change your stance on something. A person, a human being, is drastically different from the age 5 than they are at age 25. A 25-year-old is much different than a 55-year-old because there's life in the middle of that. And things, situations, moments change not only you, but change the way you think, and change the way that you act, and change the way that possibly you go about life. That's just new information that you are given allows you to change your perspective on life. The same goes with sports. New information should allow you to change your perspective, should change your view on a player, on a team, on a situation. Going into the 49ers and Green Bay game, I thought that it was a great story that the Green Bay Packers were on. It was a great wave that the Green Bay Packers are on. Seeing as how they looked from the beginning of the year to how they looked in the divisional, or how they looked in the playoff, or at the end of the year, let's just say that. They look drastically different. Jordan Love has improved. The wide receivers have improved. Matt LaFleur as a coach has improved. To the point where, again, this is the youngest team in football, I believe, at least the youngest offense. And the team in week one, there's no way in heaven or hell they would have even made the playoffs. But there's no way in heaven or hell that the week one Green Bay Packers was going to demolish the Cowboys like they did. But with new information, with time, with development, they improved, and we got what we got. So going into this game, while yes, I will say that the Green Bay Packers were much improved, I didn't think there was any shot. I'm not going to say any shot. I thought it was a long shot for them to beat the 49ers. Because of the information that I was provided by the 49ers. You have one of the most stacked offenses. You have one of the most stacked teams in general by name. But like life, like moments, like time, things allow you to change your perspective on a team, on a player, hell, on yourself. I feel much differently about the 49ers now than I did before they essentially beat the Green Bay Packers 24-21. Going into this game, I thought that the 49ers were a juggernaut, and they have been majority of the season. They're 12-5. Their biggest hiccup was when they weren't completely healthy and going against the Baltimore Ravens. I didn't think that there was a team in the NFC, at least, outside of maybe the Cowboys, that could not just win against the 49ers, but compete against the 49ers. The Green Bay Packers had every shot to win this game. They were up going into the fourth quarter, and a Kyle Shanahan team was like 0-13 or 0-30 something or whatever when trailing going into the fourth. Jordan Love was incredible in moments. Aaron Jones was incredible. The Green Bay Packers had every shot. And there was a good part of this game where I thought the Green Bay Packers were going to win this game. But Jordan Love threw 2 interceptions that essentially sealed the game for the 49ers. And Brock Purdy, even though he struggled in the first half mightily, he still finished 23 for 39, 252 yards, and 1 touchdown. Christian McCaffrey had 98 carries for 2 touchdowns. But it's interesting and it's crazy when I think about this, that even though the Green Bay Packers lost and the 49ers won, I have 2 completely different feelings about both of these teams right now. And I'm more optimistic, surprisingly, about the Green Bay Packers than I am with the 49ers. Again, it goes back to things changing and data changing. I did not foresee the Green Bay Packers not only just being here, but being this good from week 1 of the season. And now when I'm looking at the landscape of the Green Bay Packers and the landscape of the league, I can see for a good years to come, they have the quarterback of the future for them. Jordan Love has proven that he is the quarterback of the future for the Green Bay Packers. And they have one of the deepest offenses in football, whether we talk about Aaron Jones, whether we talk about Christian Watson, whether we talk about Romeo Doubs. They have a legit team. Yeah, they have to shore some things up on the defense, obviously, but they have a legit team. The future is bright, in my opinion, for the Green Bay Packers, even in a loss. But how do I feel about the 49ers? The 49ers used to have this mantra. The 49ers used to not be able to run on this team. You used to not be able to get any type of ground game on this team. And as we've seen for the last maybe 3 opponents, that's not essentially true at this point. I rave at Chase Young. I thought getting Chase Young was going to put the nail in the proverbial challenger's coffin against the 49ers. Well, Chase Young hasn't been that good for the 49ers. And for some reason, the defense, with the names that it hasn't been as dominant as I thought they would be. Again, the Green Bay Packers could have and probably should have won this game. And statistically, Brock Purdy is one of the best quarterbacks in the league while being pressured. I think statistically he's probably number 1 as far as passing yards. And shouts out to Colin Cowherd, he pointed this out. The reason why that's probably different or that's over a Patrick Mahomes or a Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen is because when they're pressured, they get out the pocket. Brock Purdy doesn't have that luxury. Brock Purdy needs to pass it. He needs to get it out. And he has the weapons to do that. But one of the question marks that I had about Brock Purdy and that we saw is, what do you look like when you don't have all the bullets in your gun? When you don't have a Christian McCaffrey humming, when you don't have a Deebo Samuel, when you don't have a George Kittle, when you don't have a Brandon Ayuk. Well, Deebo Samuel went out the game early. And on top of that, it was raining and Brock Purdy had a tough time gripping the ball. I'm not going to spoil who I think is going to win between an AFC championship or no NFC championship. But as we talk right now, Deebo Samuels is 50-50. And I think the 49ers are 8-9 if he doesn't play. Because, which is shocking, but it's true. When Brock Purdy does not have all his bullets in his gun, the 49ers, with a really good tight end, with a really good running back, with a really good number 2 wide receiver, they turn into a one-dimensional team, offensively at least, because it turns into an extreme reliance on Christian McCaffrey, which looked eerily similar to what he remembered and what he saw in Carolina. They won. So shouts out to the 49ers. They won. But I feel much different about them now than I did before the game. And we'll see. They're marching on. So there is that. I don't think there's anybody outside of course, their opponents' fan bases. I don't think there's anybody that isn't rooting for the Detroit Lions right now. I think the Detroit Lions is the most feel-good story in sports right now. You're talking about such a positivity-deprived franchise for decades. Now, essentially a game away from making their first Super Bowl. And, like, it... Everything feels good when discussing the Lions. I don't know if they will win the Super Bowl. I don't know if they even make the Super Bowl, but I think that this is a win. Mind you, Dan Campbell and this team went 3-13 and won their first year. And the Detroit Lions is the perfect, and let me reiterate. The Detroit Lions is the perfect example of how to build a team the right way. The Detroit Lions is the perfect example. This Detroit Lions is the perfect example of fit matters. You see, don't get it twisted. When Jared Goff got traded to the Detroit Lions, it was looked at as a death sentence for his career. It was looked at as you go to Detroit to die. In fact, Matthew Stafford got out of Detroit to finally win, and he essentially did with the Rams. The premise and the thought was you are never going to be able to win in Detroit, period. And for majority of their franchise life, that's been the truth. So when you get a Jared Goff, you don't expect much out of that. Even though Jared Goff did help the Rams make it to a Super Bowl, they essentially lost that one, but still. When you have Dan Campbell, people head-scratching press conference talking about biting people's ankles and biting people's knees off. It's like, oh, okay. Yeah. All right. Or when you get players that didn't work or was okay in other places, like a David Montgomery. Or when you get players that have interesting names but wasn't really a standout in college that much, in Amon-Ra St. Brown. Or when you have afterthought players like Josh Reynolds. Or when you get a linebacker and a running back in the first round of the draft in Aiden Hutchinson and Jahmyr Gibbs, and people look at you like, you just picked a running back in the first round? Or when you have a GM that knows ball, when you have a GM that allows the coach and allows his front office and allows, or when he makes the right decisions, this is what you get. This is not a fluke. This isn't a team that stumbled on being good. This isn't a team that accidentally got great. This isn't a team that accidentally had pieces hit. This is how you build a championship caliber team. Now, I'm not saying that they're going to win a championship. I'm not saying that they're even going to make it. But when you looked at that 3-13-1 Detroit Lions team, did you ever think in a year or two they would be in the NFC Championship? Or when they hired Dan Campbell and had weird press conferences, did you think they would be in the NFC Championship? And one of the main reasons why even now, even being underdogs, even being on the road, even knowing the history of this team, I'm not going to give my pick away until Saturday, but I don't think that this Lions team is much of an underdog at all against the 49ers. I will save my predictions, but I don't see much of an underdog when I look at the Lions. I see issues. Every team has issues. But those issues aren't so staggering that they can't win, or they're. I'm not gonna say they can't win. They're massive underdogs. Shouts out to the Lions for beating the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 31-23, and for Tampa Bay. Before I get off of football, you know why they say a cheater is always going to cheat, or once a cheater, always a cheater? You know why they say that the likelihood of somebody that has left jail to go back to jail is so high? It's because of tendencies. It's because once you've molded yourself into something, once you have developed habits, whether good habits or bad habits, I'm not going to say it's impossible, because it's not impossible, but it's incredibly difficult to overcome said habits. When we look at someone like Russell Westbrook plays the same exact way he did year one that he does now. It doesn't matter the jersey. It doesn't matter the teammates. Russell Westbrook plays the same exact way. The way that Russell Westbrook plays has garnished him success in the league. It's gotten him an MVP. He's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. That is how Russell Westbrook approaches the game hasn't changed. Which is why I think it's always funny and interesting when I see people say that Russell Westbrook needs to change his game. It's almost impossible because he's never had to do it. Same with James Harden. It's almost impossible because he's never had to do it. I look at Baker Mayfield, and we saw the best of Baker Mayfield and we saw the worst of Baker Mayfield in one game. Baker Mayfield threw for 349 yards, 3 touchdowns. The best of Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield, going against this defense that is a really good defense in the Detroit Lions, was going toe for toe, hit after hit after hit. Mike Evans had 8 catches for 147 yards. They were just going blow after blow after blow after blow after blow. But those habits, those tendencies, they reared his the habits that Baker Mayfield has developed over his career reared its ugly head. And don't get me wrong, I think Baker Mayfield has earned every penny of what he's about to get in his next contract. And I do think that he has earned a significant contract after what he did this year with the Bucs. But we also saw in that game why Baker Mayfield has or is even with the Bucs to speak. Because of those two interceptions. The last one being the game-ending interception. I'm not here crapping on Baker Mayfield. I think Baker Mayfield has done an exceptional job this year. I think Baker Mayfield has done much better than anyone, including probably him, could have expected. But I do think that you have to take the best and the worst with a player. And we saw the best out of Baker Mayfield, throwing 349 yards, 3 touchdowns. And we also saw the worst of Baker Mayfield, throwing two interceptions. One of them being the game-ending interception and season-ending interception, I'll say, for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So again, I'm going to save my picks for Saturday's episode. I'm going to break down how the game's going to go, how I think the game's going to go, this, that, and the third. But congratulations to all of the teams that were in the divisional round. Definitely. I think that, I know it's crazy to say when you're looking at the Lions, but I think we got the 4 best teams in football that are remaining. I know obviously they're the obviously 4 best teams, but I think when you look at how the season went and you look at the talent on each roster, outside of possibly the Cowboys, I think that these 4 teams were the best teams throughout the year in football. So again, I will give my predictions on the divisional championships or conference championships, on Saturday. But let's move over to basketball. I'm hearing a lot. I sat and thought about something the other day, 2 days ago. So Joel Embiid had an all-time game. He went for 70 points, 18 rebounds. And I heard a lot of people talking about we're going back to the bigs era. We're going back to an era where the bigs dominated. And then I thought about it. Like, I really thought hard. And shouts out to Colin Cowherd because he kind of emphasized this as well. But I thought about this hard. You hear about small ball era. You hear about the league, the NFL or NBA, being in a small ball era where the best shot to win has been with a small lineup. And I had to sit and think about that for a second, man. I'm questioning, was there ever a small ball era? Hear me out. In fact, let's go on this journey together, guys. Let's look at the last, let's say 10 NBA champions. The last 10. You have the Denver Nuggets, and the MVP of that championship was Nikola Jokic, a big. You had the Golden State Warriors. The MVP was Steph Curry. You had the Milwaukee Bucks. The MVP, Giannis Antetokounmpo. You had the LA Lakers. MVP, LeBron James. And now I mean Finals MVP. You had the Toronto Raptors. MVP, Kawhi Leonard. The Golden State Warriors twice. Both times MVP, Kevin Durant. You had LeBron James in the Cleveland Cavaliers, 2016. LeBron James. You had the Golden State Warriors in 2015. Andre Iguodala. You had the San Antonio Spurs in 2014. Kawhi Leonard. And you have the Miami Heat, both 2012 and 2013. LeBron James. You can even go back to 2011. When the Dallas Mavericks beat the Miami Heat and Dirk Nowitzki. The era of small ball was thought to have started pretty much with the 2015 Golden State Warriors, the quote-unquote death lineup. The death lineup that had Draymond Green play the center, Andre Iguodala, Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, Harrison Barnes. That was the quote-unquote death lineup and the start of the quote-unquote small ball lineup. But if we're looking, even after 2015, LeBron James, 6'8" small forward, arguably the greatest player of all time. Kevin Durant, 7 foot guard / forward, arguably the greatest scorer of all time. Kawhi Leonard, arguably the greatest forward defender of all time. Still, what, 6'7", 6'8"? Giannis Antetokounmpo, 7 foot freight train. And Nikola Jokic. In fact, let me enhance this argument. If Joel Embiid wins the MVP this year, which right now he is the favorite to win. If Joel Embiid wins the MVP this year, this will be the third consecutive MVP that has gone back to back. It will be Giannis, 7 feet, Nikola Jokic, 7 feet, and Joel Embiid, 7 feet. And on top of that, when you look at all these teams, name me the other team outside of Golden State and Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and Draymond Green. Name me the other team that has found success playing small ball. I'll wait. Because when you look at this, when you look at the last 10 or 11 NBA champions, they didn't play small ball. In fact, I only know one team that played small ball successfully, and that is the Golden State Warriors. Because they have an all-time point guard in Steph Curry, and they have an all-time defender in Draymond Green. Which made me really sit and think. I know it sounds good. And I know it was successful for them. But I don't think there was ever a small ball era. Because with there having to be an era, there has to be success in multiple areas for it to be an era. When we talk about the 80s, 90s, and the physicality of basketball, that's because it was physical. We saw Jordan damn near die in the getting clotheslined in the air. We've seen that. So we can see evidence of the physicality in today's basketball is much different than it was in the 80s and 90s. There is quantitative evidence that shows that. there isn't much evidence outside of the Golden State Warriors to prove that small ball has worked in the NFL or NBA. And honestly, there isn't much evidence to prove that small ball was successful in the NBA outside of Golden State. Because look at the teams now. Look at the teams that we consider the best right now. What do they have in common? The Boston Celtics. Jason Tatum is tall. Jaylen Brown is tall. They have a tall center in Kristaps Porzingis. They have a tall guard in Jrue Holiday. You want to go to the Milwaukee Bucks. While, yes, Damian Lillard is short, you have Giannis. You have Brook Lopez. Height, tall, big. You want to talk about the Denver Nuggets. Jamal Murray. Outside of that, you have Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, taller. Aaron Gordon, taller. Nikola Jokic, two-time MVP and Finals MVP. You can go to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Karl Anthony Towns, tall. Rudy Gobert, tall. Anthony Edwards, taller. The Oklahoma City Thunder, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, tall. The Jalen Williams, tall. Chet Holmgren, tall. What it is, you know what this era should be? I don't think there was ever a small ball era. This is the era of the skill. This is the era of skill. The league has never been this skilled. In fact, if you go back to that list of people that have won Finals MVPs, there is one outlier in the last 10 years. You know who that outlier is? Steph Curry in 2022. Because all the other MVPs were were forwards and centers. So you can't attach a era when it's only been successful with one team. But I do think that this is the era of skill. It takes skill. I know people want to crap on Shaq, but he was skilled because he knew what he had and the advantages that he had with his body, with his size, with his strength, and he was able to use that. He was also fast as hell. Joel Embiid is arguably one of the most skilled players in the league right now. I know he may not be as skilled as, say, a Nikola Jokic because of the passing, but things that Joel Embiid does, scoring the ball, no one can do because of his size, because of his strength. This is why there's such an argument with, is Joel Embiid the quote-unquote new Shaq? I don't think there will ever be a Shaquille O'Neal. Let's get that out the way. But I do think that Joel Embiid is putting on, he's sending a message that he is indeed the most dominant player in the league right now. I know the question always is in the air. Is it Giannis? Is it Nikola Jokic? I think Joel Embiid is trying to silence that, seeing as though if this league finished today, he will be the first center, I think, in NBA history to lead the league in scoring for 3 consecutive years. And as you sit today, there's no way to stop Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid's biggest criticisms came from his own fault, meaning he takes too much threes. He takes too much jump shots. Well, now he don't do that. He gets to the rim and he dominates. I don't think we've ever gotten out of a bigs era. I think that bigs have always been important outside of one team, which is the Golden State Warriors. But again, we're talking about a team that is undoubtedly one of the greatest teams, scoring one of the greatest teams of all time. When we talk about just the offensive firepower and the defense, you had a team with, in my opinion, the two greatest shooters of all time in Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. Then you had arguably a top 5 shooter of all time in Kevin Durant. Then you had a generational defender in both Draymond Green and Andre Iguodala. And you had that architect to put it all together in Steve Kerr. That don't make an era. That just makes you a superior team in NBA history. We have always had an era of bigs. We've never left the big era. Yes, things have changed. Like there's been a shooting boom. Like there's been an offensive boom. There's been now when you look at someone like Joel Embiid, when you look at someone like a Nikola Jokic, when you look at someone like Dirk Nowitzki, it's very important to shoot the ball. And it's very important to have a big that can shoot. But it's always been a bigs era. We've never gotten out. Bigs have always been important. They just haven't been as skilled as they are in today's game. And that's all around the board. Not just bigs as far as centers and forwards. We have big guards. Luka Doncic is a big guard. Shai Gilgeous is a big guard. DeJounte Murray is a big guard. And those are extremely vital to have. Even though he's struggling right now, Klay Thompson is still 6'7". To put that in context, that's 1 inch shorter than LeBron, well, 2 inches shorter than LeBron James. So, I said all that to say congratulations to Joel Embiid for becoming the first center since Wilt Chamberlain to drop 70 points in a game and 18 rebounds. Right now, he's leaving little doubt to who currently is the best center in the league. It's very hard to pick anyone other than the reigning MVP in Joel Embiid. So shouts out to him. I want to highlight Karl Anthony Towns for a second because Karl Anthony Towns also had a huge feat, dropping a career high 62 points for the Wolves in a loss to the Hornets. And I look at this 62 points as somewhat of a cautionary tale. What happens when you do things the wrong way? Let me first say that it is a skill to drop 62 points. Not everyone in the league can drop 62 points. I just keep it. Karl Anthony Towns is on a very special list of not only big man in the league, but of shooting big man. I think that he is undoubtedly the second best shooting big man of all time. If you want to include Dirk, if you're not including Dirk as a quote unquote big man, then I think Karl Anthony Towns is probably the best shooting big man of all time. But the Timberwolves, who is number one in the West, went about this the wrong way. And I don't mean it in a way that you think I mean it. There's been multiple occasions where I've been on a team, whether that's pickup, whether that's college, whether that's high school. I've been on a team where one of my guys is going off. I'll never forget this story. College. I'm playing for my team, and one of my teammates, Denzel Bowden, shouts out to him. Hope he's doing good. Denzel Bowden, he is having a game of his life. Like, we went into halftime. I think he had like 28 points. Now, in college, that's incredible. And the game plan going into the game, mind you, Denzel was not our main player. He was not our best player, but he was just hot. And the game plan after seeing how the first half went is, let's create for Denzel. Let's get Denzel back hot. Let's ride his offensive momentum. But we ultimately won that game, and Denzel had I think maybe 33 or maybe 35 points or something like that, or maybe 30. He had 37. When your man is going off like that, when your teammate, and you can see from jump, he's having a night. You do everything that you can to help them continue that streak, but not just to continue the streak, but to win the game. That's what the Minnesota Timberwolves failed to do. At the end of the day, you want to win. Don't get me wrong. Yes. But you don't do it you don't help your mans win and completely throw away the keys to winning the game. And that's what the Minnesota Timberwolves did. They threw away their defensive intensity. They threw away their winning game plan to force feed Karl Anthony Towns. Now, no, I am not downgrading anything that Karl Anthony Towns did, because 62 points is 62 points. You know how hard it is to score 62 points in 2K, let alone real life? So I'm not taking anything away from what Karl Anthony Towns did. What I'm shining light on the fact is the reason why the Minnesota Timberwolves lost to a team that is one of the worst teams in basketball while helping Karl Anthony Towns get 62 points, because there became a point in the game where the players completely forgot, or completely just said, maybe not consciously, but subconsciously said, all right, my goal is to get Karl Anthony Towns as much points as possible because he's hot, and completely forgot, we still got to win a game. And they thought that the momentum from Karl Anthony Towns was going to win them the game, which was not the case. They were up double digits in this game and essentially lost to a hapless Hornets team that was shorthanded, might I add. So shouts out to Karl Anthony Towns for getting 62. I'm not taking anything away from you, brother. You're probably a top, you're a top 5 center in this league. But what you saw the Timberwolves do is they lost their winning integrity to help Karl Anthony Towns get his points. And in certain situations, we saw that before with Devin Booker, when Devin Booker dropped 70 and they lost. Now, obviously, that was 2 different situations. This Timberwolves team was much better than that Phoenix Suns team, but still, they completely. The objective for the players, maybe not the coaches, but for the players, were, we are riding the hot hand. Let's give the ball to Karl Anthony Towns. And they completely went away from the winning formula. And the winning formula is different for different teams, but they were winning majority of the game. But shouts out to Karl Anthony Towns. We had breaking news yesterday. Adrian Griffin, who is now the former head coach of the Milwaukee Bucs, was fired. This is, at least from the outside looking in, this is shocking news, seeing as though the Bucs have one of the best records in basketball. This is the first year that obviously you have the pairing of Damian Lillard and Giannis, so we knew that was going to take some time. I've said this before, and I've said this again. Sports is a star-driven league. or star-driven thing. I understand more obviously basketball than football, but if you have a franchise changer, if you have a generational player like a Steph, like a Giannis Antetokounmpo, like a Nikola Jokic, like a Joel Embiid, like a LeBron James, they're going to have the ultimate say-so. Because you know what other teams don't have that you have? A generational player. There's not many of them in the league. There's great players. There's Hall of Fame worthy players. There's championship worthy players. But generational players, there's not many of them. The Bucs, you know what's perfect example? Damian Lillard is not a generational player. He's a great player. He's a Hall of Famer. He is not a generational player. Giannis is a generational player. Anthony Davis is not a generational player. He has the ability to be one, but he has not shown that he is a generational player. LeBron James, obviously, is a generational player. To a very, very, very lesser extent, and no offense to him, Steph Curry is a generational player. Jordan Poole is not and was not. Very talented scoring the ball when he was with Golden State, but there's differences. And I'm not saying that Giannis got Adrian Griffin fired, because I don't know what happened. This is breaking news. But I do know that if Giannis wanted Adrian Griffin would still be the head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks. If Giannis wanted to keep Adrian Griffin, we wouldn't be talking about Adrian Griffin right now. Now, this Bucs team hasn't looked good majority of the year. Even though when you have talented players like Giannis, like Dame, you're going to stumble into wins. But anyone that has looked at the Bucs this year cannot say that they have looked like a championship caliber team as far as defensively. Now, I knew they were going to struggle when you give up a Drew Holiday, when you give up a Grayson Allen for Damian Lillard, who is historically not known to be playing defense. I thought they were going to struggle. And yes, they have struggled, but I also thought it was going to take time for them to I knew the defense wasn't going to be the same, but I thought it was going to take time for Giannis and Dame to gel, which is why you saw some of the early losses that you saw. So I'm shocked. I don't really have much of an analysis on this. I'm shocked. I didn't see it coming. I didn't know if Adrian Griffin was the right coach, but he was the coach. And I just didn't think that they were going to fire him, especially when you look at the standings. Give me a second. When you look at the standings, the Milwaukee Bucks have the second best record in the East. So I'm shocked, but hey, again, if Giannis wanted him to be there, he would be there. That's all I'll say on that. So we'll see, I guess. Kevin Durant, man. Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant is in the news lately for some of the comments that he said. When asked or questioned about, or when discussing, because I don't know what prompted this or what brought it up, but when discussing the greatest of all time, the argument of greatest of all time, we usually hear the same few names. We hear LeBron James. We hear Michael Jordan. We hear Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. We hear Magic Johnson. To a lesser extent, we hear Kobe Bryant and Tim Duncan, Shaq. We hear those type of names. The name that you never hear is Kevin Durant. And Kevin Durant was questioning that, pretty much saying, what has he not done? Why is he not in the considered when discussing the greatest of all time conversation? Why is it that when people say X player is the greatest of all time or Y player is the greatest of all time, they're never really discussing Kevin Durant. I talked about this briefly when I was talking about Lamar Jackson. We're at a day and age where greatness is a lot closer than it used to be. And what that means is, let's look at the Michael Jordan era. There was Michael Jordan, and then nobody was close to Michael Jordan. Like, close. Now, you had talent, obviously. Clyde Drexler, Dominique Wilkins. You had Charles Barkley. You had a young Kobe. You had Hakeem Olajuwon. All great players. All-time players. But there was such a gap between them and Michael Jordan that there was really no discussion of who was the best player. When you look at today's basketball and you look at basketball or the Kevin Durant era or the era that Kevin Durant has played basketball in, talent is so close. Like, let's not get it twisted. I don't think talent-wise, I don't think Kevin Durant is much further than LeBron James is. I don't think that Kevin Durant is much further than, let's say, Steph Curry is. I don't think there's much of a gap between talent-wise between Kevin Durant and Tracy McGrady or Kevin Durant and Carmelo Anthony back in the day. Kevin Durant or, let's say, Kawhi Leonard. So because of that, like I said about Lamar Jackson, accolades matter. Because when talent doesn't have such a gap where there's just like, we can't say much, then there has to be something there. We have to throw in accolades. And excuse me, for a career, Kevin Durant has averaged 27.4 points a game, 4 assists a game, 7 rebounds a game. He's one of the greatest scorers of all time. But when we talk about accolades, that is why. You see, I was never upset with Kevin Durant for choosing Golden State. I don't think that Kevin Durant's move to Golden State wasn't a snake move. I thought that he made the best decision for him to win. And Kevin Durant was at a point of his career where he was dangerously falling in that Charles Barkley, Dominique Wilkins pool of great but never won a championship. John Stockton. Kevin Durant was dangerously living in that realm. And going to Golden State was obviously the best option for him. So I was never in ultimately winning a championship. So I never was upset. I was never hating on I was never mad that Kevin Durant went to Golden State to essentially play alongside Steph, Clay, and all them and get a championship or two. But what it did was it forever changed this conversation. I'm not going to say he was a snake. I'm not going to say this, that, and the third. But what it did do is it drastically changed this conversation. This greatest of all time conversation. Drastically. That's one thing that I will admit and agree with everyone else as far as that move did affect this conversation, because with a move like that comes expectation. And it doesn't just come expectation as far as what you do with that team. It's always about what you do after that team as well. You see, Kevin Durant set the bar incredibly high for himself going to Golden State. You're playing alongside arguably a top 10 player of all time and arguably one of the greatest, if not the greatest point guard of all time in Steph Curry. And you essentially did what you wanted to do. You won 2 championships. You would have won a third if everyone didn't get hurt. But people looked at that move however they want to look at that move. People saying it's the weakest move from a superstar. Cool. Got you. I hear you. I hear you, Slim. But now, whether you understood it or not, there is now an expectation that if and when you do leave this team, you have to win a championship. Without that team, without the greatness of Steph Curry, without the greatness of Klay Thompson, without the greatness of Draymond Green, without the greatness of Steve Kerr. And you haven't done that. And on top of that, I understand that we're not breaking down the entire situations, but you had Kyrie Irving, you had James Harden, you had now Devin Booker and Bradley Beal. You played alongside Russell Westbrook. You played alongside an MVP in James Harden, an MVP in Russell Westbrook, an MVP or future MVP at the time, Russell Westbrook and James Harden. You played 2-time MVP in Steph Curry. You played finals MVP or finals champion Kyrie and Devin Booker, who has a 70-point game in his career. You see, if we just talk about talent, then yes, Kevin Durant is most definitely in the conversation of greatest of all time. But the greatest of all time conversation isn't just about talent. Because when we talk about talent, there isn't much difference up there, up in that realm. You see, people didn't put Steph Curry in that top 10 conversation until when? 2022. When he did what? Win a championship after Kevin Durant. Mind you, Steph Curry won a championship before Kevin Durant. But nobody put him in that top 10 conversation, that greatest point guard of all time conversation, until when? 2022. Again, before then, he already had 3 championships. He had 2 MVPs, one of them being unanimous. And he was already considered the greatest shooter of all time. But what didn't they call him? A top 10 player. Arguably the greatest point guard of all time until 2022, when he won a championship after playing alongside Kevin Durant. And that's how it is. Skill doesn't matter here. Because LeBron James is skilled. Michael Jordan's skilled. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is skilled. Magic Johnson is skilled. Shaq is skilled. And those skills ain't much apart from each other. So now when you tag on accolades and how you got those accolades, that's where the conversation changes, Kevin Durant. I've been hearing saying that I think that Kevin Durant is arguably the greatest offensive weapon of all time. And yes, that's even the person that I'm wearing his hoodie, Kobe. I think Kevin Durant is arguably a greater offensive weapon than Kobe Bean Bryant. But when we talk about greatest of all time, until I see you be the best player on a team definitively and win a championship like Michael Jordan was, like LeBron James was several times. That's why Kevin Durant's not in the conversation. And I love Kevin Durant, both from the DMV area. I'm never going to say anything bad about Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant is great. I've been on this hill saying Kevin Durant's better than Larry Bird. But even Larry Bird has things that Kevin Durant hasn't. And that, KD, is why people don't put you in the greatest of all time conversations. Lastly, before we go, I want to have a little bit of fun. I saw that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson was on First Take the other day, and it got me thinking. I started this episode talking about it with a subjective question, and the thing about subjective questions that is beautiful, and honestly, subjective questions show you humanity, show you just the how different humans are. Subjective questions, you can ask 10 people a question that is subjective, and you'll get 10 different answers. Like, one of the most famous subjective questions is, what's your favorite movie? Or what's your favorite artist? What's your favorite song? You ask 100 people, you'll get 100 different answers. That shows just how different people are. A sports subjective question is Mount Rushmore. Who is on your Mount Rushmore? Who is on your or basketball Mount Rushmore, football Mount Rushmore? That question is subjective because everyone is different. There's people that think that Jerry Rice is on the football Mount Rushmore. There's people that think Lawrence Taylor. There's people that think Randy Moss. There's people that think Patrick Mahomes. The question is different. The question, you'll get a different answer. And with The Rock being on First Take and talking about, WrestleMania and his fighting days, I thought about my Mount Rushmore of wrestlers. Now, no. I'm not a wrestling fanatic. I used to be a huge wrestling fan back like when I was a kid. And this is no offense to all the adults that are wrestling fans. This honestly is a segment for you. I'm not poking any fun. I'm just saying that I am not a huge wrestling fan. I don't watch wrestling anymore. It's just something I just stopped watching. And it's no offense to anyone that watches it. Shouts out to y'all. I used to be a huge fan, man. I used to watch it Monday Raw, Friday Night SmackDown. I used to watch all of it. I even as a kid sometimes got my mom, very rare, maybe happened 2 or 3 times in my life, got her to pay the pay-per-view to watch a WrestleMania or to watch a Royal Rumble or Survivor Series or SummerSlam, So while I am not a current wrestling fan or a current wrestling fanatic, I do have a long, extensive history of enjoying the WWF and the WWE, And it's so interesting because I did a little bit of research. I Googled and YouTubed WWE or WWF Mount Rushmore, and I got millions of different videos. I didn't watch millions, but I got millions of different videos seeing that this question, even for WW or wrestling fans, is the same. So for the unpopular topic of the day, I'm going to give you my Mount Rushmore, which is obviously who is my 4 favorite wrestlers of all time. No particular order. Now again, when I was younger, I used to love wrestling. And There was no, I was one of those kids I was one of those kids that my mom bought me a WWE or WWF World Champion belt. I had toys galore. Like I was WWF down. Like you couldn't tell me. I used to like wrestling more than basketball. Now, for people that know me and hear that statement, you would think that's crazy as much as I love basketball now, but I used to love wrestling way more than I love basketball. And one of the people that I used to love, obviously, is The Rock, which is why I started this. So The Rock is I'm not going to, in no particular order, I'm just going to, I'm just saying 1, 2, and 3 as far as listing, but one is not better than 4, So for the first person on my Mount Rushmore is The Rock. There have been a lot of African-American wrestlers before The Rock and after The Rock, obviously, but The Rock was the first person that I think as a kid felt like we had something in common because of our race. And on top of that, The Rock was one of the most electrifying people to watch. Like when you talk about the people's elbow and if you smell, stuff like you, boy, when that song came on and then he did the eyebrow, like it as a kid, I was elated. Like The Rock, I looked at The Rock the same way people looked at Tom Brady, like ooh, The Rock is The Rock. So The Rock is on my Mount Rushmore. And if I'm going to put The Rock, the next person I have to put is Stone Cold Steve Austin. Stone Cold Steve Austin, while I didn't feel a connection to him as far as like my personality or whatever, it was so interesting and so fascinating watching Stone Cold because he was one of the first people that I can remember. I'm sure there was people before him that I can remember that his sole purpose was to buck the system. We talk about the rattlesnake. We talk about, breaking the glass, John 3:16. When we talk about the beer, we talk about the ATVs. We talk about the Stone Cold Stunner. We talk about the skull that he had. It's everything about Stone Cold embodied bucking the system. And he, alongside with The Rock, alongside with people like Bret Hart, alongside people like Shawn Michaels, they had some of those matches were incredible. Some of those matches were life-changing for me. Like I remember one of the first pay-per-views my mom bought for me was I believe it was WrestleMania when The Rock went against Stone Cold. That is still arguably one of my favorite matches of all time because of the nostalgia, because two of my favorite wrestlers of all time right now are fighting each other, and it was great. So my two faces on my Mount Rushmore right now is The Rock, Stone Cold, and the third one I have is The Undertaker. You can't look at wrestling. You can't look at where wrestling is. You can't look at where wrestling came from without the contributions from The Undertaker. From his stare to the caskets to some of the legendary matches like him and Edge, to some of the pyrotechnics that he used. There will never be a wrestler like The Undertaker. Now, yes, there are some great wrestlers. Don't get me wrong. Like Roman Reigns is great, and Cody Rhodes is great, and there are some great John Cena was great. But when we talk about the embodiment of fear, as well as greatness, as well as legendary, it doesn't go as far as you can't go much further than The Undertaker. In fact, I like The Undertaker so much. You know how upset I was when I found out in real life that The Undertaker and Kane were not real brothers? Like, I was devastated. There's, you know how people, have that quote unquote wrestling's not real, or and how it, or when kids find out that Santa isn't real. Like when I found out that Kane and Undertaker was not a real brother, I was like, what? I felt like my whole life was a lie. But I loved watching Undertaker. He was just great. And even though at that time I wasn't watching wrestling at all, really, I was still hurt. I still felt some type of way when Brock Lesnar broke Undertaker's WrestleMania streak. Like, again, at that time, I wasn't watching wrestling, but when I heard that, I was like, oh, whoa. Like, I felt it in my chest. Like, wait a second. What is going on? So, Undertaker is definitely in my Mount Rushmore. So, the fourth one, I could have gone a bunch of places. I could have gone with Triple H. I think Triple H, I used to do that. I know it was probably nasty as hell now I think about it, but I used to do that like in my room. I used to do that outside with the whole, put a mouthful of water and then spit it out. And yeah, I used to do all that. And I think Triple H's entrance music is one of the best. It's all about the game and how you play it. Yeah, I think that's one of the best intros ever. I can go with John Cena. I think John Cena, he has been vital for wrestling as a whole. And John Cena, kind of like Batista, shout out to Batista, DC native, or DC native, I guess. They have had, and The Rock obviously has had incredible success both with wrestling and with the box office. Batista, he was great in Guardians of the Galaxy. He was also in what else was he in? What's that? Dune was a pretty good movie. John Cena's had an uber success. He was in Fast and the Furious. So shouts out to them. But for my fourth person, now again, this is a very subjective conversation, so I'm just giving my opinion. I'm probably going to clip this up and put it out, and I'm sure that this is going to get a bunch of comments saying, how did you forget? This is my list. If you want, you give me your list, you give me your list. I'm all ears. My last person, my fourth person, has to go to Jeff Hardy. I thought, well, those instances where they say don't try this at home, and you see those videos of brothers, suplexing their sister or rock bottoming their sister. Me and my sister had a very rocky relationship growing up because I used to do Jeff Hardy moves on my sister, whether it was damn near broke my neck trying to do the Swanton bomb on her before. I used to do the whole, Jeff Hardy pelvic thrust jump. Jeff Hardy, you couldn't tell me anything. And that is my favorite match of all time that I've watched. I think it was the WWE Championship. It was a triple threat. Jeff Hardy, Edge, and Triple H. And Jeff Hardy ultimately won it, or the WWE Championship. Yeah, that was my favorite match of all time. When I tell you, there's not much things in life that get me to the point where I'm like cheesing happy. Don't get me wrong, I'm happy about a lot of things, but there's not a lot of life in life that gets me to the point where I can't stop cheesing because I'm so happy about something. When I saw Jeff Hardy beat Triple H and Edge in that triple threat match to win the WWE MVP or WWE Championship, I was elated. Jeff Hardy, whether we talk about some of the Extreme Rules matches or the table, ladders, and chairs match that he was integral in growing and building. Some of his legendary matches with the Dudley brothers, with Edge and Christian, with even his brother Matt Hardy. This man was doing swanton bombs off of the entrance screen. Like, come on, bro. My Mount Rushmore of wrestling is The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Undertaker, and Jeff Hardy. What is your Mount Rushmore? I understand that most everyone's is going to be different, and I'm welcome to that. Let me know what your Mount Rushmore is. We'll discuss it. I want to have a Discord about that. I want to have a conversation about that in the comments. Leave me who your Mount Rushmore was in wrestling, and we'll talk about it. And there you have it, man. That has been today's episode of the Unpopular Podcast. I truly, truly, truly appreciate you guys. If you want an Unpopular Podcast shirt, hoodie, sweater, long sleeve joggers, the link is in the description below. I have multiple different colors, multiple different designs. Get your Unpopular Podcast merch today. Also, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'm trying to get as many subscribers as possible. I'm trying to get my engagement up, so tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend. Like, comment, share. It definitely means a lot to me. Also, my DSP listeners are just as important as my YouTube listeners. So if you're listening on a DSP, whether that's SoundCloud, Apple Music, Spotify, please follow, please subscribe. It definitely means a lot. Also, follow the socials. Follow Instagram. Follow TikTok. I post pretty much daily there. That's the fastest way to get to me as far as wanting me to see a comment or trying to comment something. Just keep it respectful, and I'll probably comment back. Just let me know. And until next time, much love.